I'm Diana.
And I'm Zach.
And we're the Farrier's Bellows, a podcast dedicated to bringing you games and tools to take your adventures further.
We're going to be talking about non-traditional indie RPGs, some that have been around for years, others that are newer, to take you beyond the ordinary.
Today, join us as we make a clean getaway in Out of Dodge.
Our first segment is The Call to Adventure. Out of Dodge is a game by Jason Morningstar. It was first released in 2014 through Bully Pulpit Games, and it is a crime drama game, I think, and a comedy, I would say.
I think you get to make it a comedy if you want to.
I don't think that you could play this without it being a comedy, based on the mechanics.
That's true.
It's going to devolve into comedy and hilarity and just nonsense. Out of Dodge is a 4-player role-playing game about a group of criminals making their way out of a heist gone bad. One of you has been shot, and you're making out with way less loot than you expected to. 11 pieces to split between the 4 of you. As you make your getaway, you are asked, who will live, who will die, and will we have a chance to stop for ice cream? The game can be played either in a car or, as we played, with 4 chairs set up like a car in front of a television, playing one of the many long drive videos that are available on YouTube. Off the bat, we are going to try to stay as spoiler-free in this episode as we can, but we're going to be talking about some of the basic mechanics of this game, which are themselves kind of spoilers. So just a fair warning on that. I think when we played, I was the only one who actually knew what the basic mechanics were and kind of how they interacted. So just as a fair warning, that itself could potentially be considered a spoiler.
So like he said, I'm going to try to stay as spoiler-free as possible, but I don't know how possible that is. The core of the game is pretty simple. You get an envelope that gives you your role and 2 tasks. On the front of your envelope is your role and your first task for most of the players. And usually it's something that you do when your character hears a specific word. The second task is something that's more secret and is inside the envelope. The outside of your envelope will tell you when you're supposed to open your envelope to get the second thing. Every character opens their envelope at different times when it's triggered for them. The task inside the envelope usually triggers somebody else to do something drastic. The only exception to this is the driver, who, for safety reasons, doesn't open their envelope. All of their tasks are on the front of their envelope. Lastly, you do all of this while acting out this crazy heist scene. Well, really, not the heist. You're acting out the drive away, the getaway scene. And either you're actually driving a car or you're pretending to drive a car. Hopefully, you're doing all of that safely.
Yes, whatever you are doing, make sure you're doing it safely, which is why we decided to play in our living room.
Yes.
I really wanted to play in a car. I wanted to go all out on this. I wanted us to dress in suits and get in a car and go. But in hindsight, I'm glad that we didn't.
I agree.
We can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we can.
Dinah, what are some things that you liked?
I played as the driver, but I really liked that secret move mechanic, that, you open your envelope whenever it's triggered for you, and you have this secret move, this thing that you're supposed to be doing for somebody else. And I thought that was really fun. I thought that was really cool. My character did not have it, but knowing that I was waiting for somebody else to open their envelope so that I could do my next thing was like, it added to the suspense of the game. I don't know. I really liked it. It was super fun. It was a super fun, surprise.
Yeah, especially when you don't know, what it is.
Right.
The first time you play this game and you do not know what your secret move is going to be, and then you discover it, and a lot of the time, so for my character, as soon as I read my secret move, I knew what my secret move was going to do. But for other people, you don't necessarily know what your secret move or what your secret objective is going to trigger for the other people in the car.
Yeah.
So you might do what the thing says, and then someone else reacts in an entirely unexpected way, and you're like, wait, did I just do that? Or is this something else? What is happening?
Yeah.
Which I think does a really good job of building up that like the confusion that is
Yeah.
going on in this like scenario.
Yeah. I didn't really talk about it before, but it is something that I also like that's kind of related. I know I'm going a little off script, but you don't know what went wrong with your heist and why, like, all of the things that you start the game off with happened that way, like why you have such less loot than you were expecting and why someone got shot. Like, you don't know that. So you're adding to the confusion is trying to figure out what happened, and also like figuring out when you're supposed to do your things and what's going to trigger your next thing and what your thing's going to trigger in somebody else. Like, that confusion, man, it's laid on thick.
And what I think is really cool about that, we always jump around. We have these like delineated sections that as we do the podcast are slowly like becoming less and less delineated. But that discovery works so well with the improv aspect of this game, because it's a very improv heavy game. It's a LARP heavy game, and you're sort of like discovering what's happening as it's going. And what I like about that is that people who are inexperienced with improv, you can just start throwing stuff out there.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't stick, there's plenty of in-genre, in-setting, sensible reasons why it doesn't stick. Maybe you are embarrassed because you didn't do what you were supposed to do for your job, and that's why things went wrong. So you're like saying that something else went wrong and it was somebody else's fault when it was really your fault. Maybe you are a mole and you actually did, like, maybe you double-crossed the team and that's why you're getting information wrong. Maybe you genuinely didn't see it in all the chaos. So there's all these explanations, like there's all these reasonings why the thing you're throwing out in an improv setting could necessarily be wrong.
Right.
You are free to throw out your own ideas in a way that doesn't necessitate you building on other people's ideas in the traditional like yes and model,
right,
or the no but model. You can throw out ideas and as you're going sort of discover what you want to make canon.
Yeah.
Right?
Do we want to keep going on this, or do we want to...
Yeah, you're right.
You just looked like you were about to go on a roll, and we have a whole section dedicated to this.
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
One thing I really liked was that in the bag of loot that you have, at the start of the game, there are a number of secret twists. And you select one at random without looking at it and put it in the bag. And when someone finally checks on the loot to see like how you actually did, that secret thing triggers. And it can be something very mundane, like spoilers. One of the things you got away with have rolled under the seat and you can't find it, to absolutely wild, like there is a head in the bag.
Yeah.
And I like that, because it creates this very solid line between like acts in the game, and it also adds some replayability to the game, right? That's the real randomization in the game, and I'm not sure if it is enough to make the game surprising again, but it is enough to make the game, to add some replayability to the game.
That's something that we'll talk about a little later, but the replayability is something that I definitely want to touch on in a little bit. I really liked the weird stories that develop as you're trying to fit in, like the words that you have to trigger in somebody else and the actions that you're going to have to do when someone triggers them for you, but also trying to figure out what happened during this heist, and also trying to be the person who gets the most money, and also like for me driving the car or whatever. Our story was very weird and aggressive. It was very weird and aggressive. And I know that if we played again with a different twist in the bag and with all of us playing different roles, even if we played like a similar like sort of story, it wouldn't be. It would be a very different story, which I don't know. I just thought that was like really fun. Our heist was terrible. It was a terrible heist. We did a bad job.
Oh yeah. I mean, yes, it went terribly.
Yeah, but it was bad from the beginning, which is awesome to find out as you're like running away from the scene. Like as you're getting into your getaway car, you're like, oh wow, we put zero thought into this and it's terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was really fun. What about you?
I really like the set building of the game. There is a lot to interact with, and there is a lot that builds sort of the Fargo-esque, Coen Brothers-esque genre in the game. Mm-hmm. At the top of that, I think the first thing that you're interacting with when you start looking at the game is your characters' names. The 4 characters are Rat, Mole, Badger, and Toad, which just gives like such a fun sort of Reservoir Dogs feel to the game that you have these code names. And I loved yelling at each other in their code names. Yeah. And I also loved the confusion that comes with having 2 players, one named Rat and one named Mole, and then everyone start arguing who the rat or the mole could be. And just the confusion that comes in there. But more than that, there's also just like the setting that you build around the magic circle of the game. Mm-hmm. In regards to like the props and the things that you're using. So like we went to the dollar store and we bought these little plastic coins for our loot, which it like informed our robbery that we robbed a museum. Oh, because
wasn't it a university?
Yeah, it might have been like a university archives. Mm-hmm. And because the video that we chose was a drive through New Orleans,
it was legitimately pirates' treasure.
Yeah, we created this whole story using the props that we had that informed this game in such a fun and engaging way. Mm-hmm. That I just thought that the whole building of that liminal space and magic circle space was like so well done and so cohesive. Mm-hmm. That I really enjoyed it. Should I define magic circle?
Maybe, because I have no idea what you're talking about.
So the magic circle is the space within a game in which the rules are changed from that of reality. So, for example, in boxing, in the magic circle of boxing, it is acceptable to punch someone in the face, right?
Whereas it's not acceptable to do that if you're walking down the street.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's like I think that's like the most clear-cut example, mm-hmm. but it also changes, like, you can think of it in terms of what is narratively appropriate, right? Mm-hmm. So in our game, in the Magic Circle, it was appropriate for me to point a foam gun at your head.
Yeah, which you did.
Which I would point a foam gun at your head, but in the Magic Circle, or in rather like the liminal space, the imaginative space of mm-hmm. the game, it was a real gun, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, I would never do that in the real world.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
But in this liminal space, in this Magic Circle space, I was able to do that, and we were able to, like, or even you pulling over, because as the driver at one point you pulled over. I did. We're like, I can't deal with this anymore. Somebody drive. I can't do this.
Yeah.
And like you getting out of the car was like you acting within this liminal space, mm-hmm. right? And just the way that the game uses those elements, I thought was really magical.
I agree. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, so I don't want to get too much into it, because I have a lot of comments.
I know, I'm getting so far ahead.
I have a lot of comments, but I will talk about that later. But I 100% and totally agree with you. There were some things I did have some questions about, so I'm going to go back to one of the things I said I was going to talk about.
Okay, I'll answer them for you.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I have a legitimate concern about the replayability of this game with the same people. Mm-hmm. I think if you introduce a new player, it's totally replayable, because for that player, it's new, right? Like, they're discovering some stuff. However, I don't know if we were to play this game with the same people again, I really don't actually know if it would be as fun replaying it. Even like we discussed it. We all sat down and were like, okay, could we play this again? Because our run of it was kind of short. We talked about maybe we could play this again, and we could move everybody's characters, like who everybody was playing, we could move them around. But the surprise and those trigger words, like, now we know what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Now we know that we're pushing a button, whereas before we didn't necessarily know that we were pushing a button. And so I think this game is replayable. I don't know to what extent it is the same level of fun. And the game tries to be more replayable, because you can change out those code words. But
yeah, so the game comes with form fillable sheets that you can change the code words. But whoever designs those is going to, it basically is like they're
the GM.
not the GM, but like they have the key to the code. They know how everything is going to interact. So if you make the forms for your own game, you're already going to know all the code words and how they're going to come up, which I guess could still be fun if you're playing the mole, who's the driver, and your primary goal is to, or your primary like job is to ask questions and like kind of piece together everything. Even if you use a form fillable sheet, which I was very surprised to see that I couldn't find any in our short, we didn't try for like hours, but we tried for like 20 minutes to find anyone online who had released their own kind of form fillable changes. Couldn't find any. And I was very surprised to see that. I would really, this game is rife for hacking and for small changes to kind of keep it fresh. And I could not find that. But even if you used that written by someone else, you would still know all the interactions and how all the interactions work. So I'm going to respond to this in the Inmost Cave.
Okay. All right. I feel like we need to get to the Inmost Cave. So
I know.
Before we move on to the Inmost Cave, is there anything that stood out to you so that we can get to the meat of this that apparently we keep trying to get to anyway?
The form fillable sheets I thought were a really wonderful resource because I'm sure Jason knew as he was writing this that this game was going to have limited replayability in some form, right? Some aspect of it was going to be limited in replayability, and I really appreciate that and the random bag notes as an attempt to make sure that this game can be kept fresh, because there are going to be people who want it to be fresh every time, the same way that other RPGs are fresh every time. But I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about that after having put a little bit of distance between us in the session.
Our next segment is Approach the Inmost Cave. So Zach, just spill your brain out for this podcast. Do all of it there.
No. Okay, so we have two big things going on with this game, right? And I want to address one before we go back to the replayability of this game. So the first is how this game is part of a tradition, community, collection of LARP style games, right? And this game isn't really LARP. What this game is American Freeform. So American Freeform is born out of Nordic Freeform. It's the North American answer to Nordic Freeform, which is a role-playing game movement that employs elements of tabletop RPGs and LARP, right? They're usually highly immersive games that often utilize some sort of prop or movement outside of just like sitting at a table with some... And they're usually a little bit more mechanical, I would say, than like what we traditionally think of as LARPs. Like usually there is like things like character sheets or things that you're like keeping track of on a table, or randomizing with like dice or something like that. So it's this middle ground, sort of. This is an oversimplification, but it's a middle ground between tabletop RPG and LARP. And this game fits squarely in that space, right? And what I think Out of Dodge does so well is introduce or give a dial to players to go between tabletop RPG, American Freeform, full LARP. Right? And give you that space to explore improvisational play, I think. I should say improvisational role play. All RPGs are improvisational play, but you don't necessarily have to heavily role play in D&D, right? You can sit down with D&D and just play it almost as a board game if you really wanted. I mean,
I'm going to go do this thing over here. I'm standing here. I do that thing. You don't have to do a voice. You don't have to act it out. You don't,
I hit it with my sword. I use this move. Like you can refer to it entirely in mechanical senses if you so chose, right? You can't do that with Out of Dodge.
That would have been a little ridiculous. I'm sitting in the front seat. I'm pretending to drive a car.
Yes.
Like,
right.
that's what I would have said, and then I would have just sat there silently.
Yeah, and the mechanics don't allow you to do that kind of thing.
No.
Of the 4 of us that played, only you and I had any experience with live action roleplay. And at that, it was very limited experience. You and I have LARPed once. And LARP can be kind of an intimidating thing for people to engage with. I know a lot of nerds who consider LARP to be like the last frontier of like, all right, I play Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons bi-weekly, but
at least I don't LARP.
I'm not going to go out in the woods and dress up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It gets kind of like this. I think it's a mix of things. I think people are very intimidated by it as a performance activity.
Right, yeah.
And I think, a lot of nerds give it a bad rep because they're like, I don't know, they think of it as this thing that's beyond them in terms of nerdiness when it's not. It's super not.
I know I was terrified when we LARPed. And we were LARPing with like friends.
Yeah.
Like it was like a one-time deal, and I was super, super nervous about it.
I was pretty nervous, but I was excited, and it was a super interesting experience.
Oh, yeah.
I've never experienced anything like it before, except for Out of Dodge. I think Out of Dodge is the closest I've ever been to replicating that experience. And in Out of Dodge, we went super heavy into the LARP.
Yeah.
Right. We broke character only twice, I think.
Yeah.
Once to when a character died, we wanted to make sure the character was really dead. So we paused the game and was like, hey, are you dead or are you just passed out? And then once...
I asked if we could actually go to the hospital because I don't know. In the game, it doesn't say if you can actually stop the car and get out. So I didn't know. Like, the character was dying. They weren't quite dead yet. And I was like, am I allowed to go to the hospital? I didn't know. He died. It solved itself. So I just kept driving. But like, I didn't know if I was allowed to. So I had to ask the question.
Yeah. Otherwise, we were entirely in character for the entirety of the game. Mm-hmm. And what is cool about this setup is you have this LARP dial. If you wanted to go really heavy, and like I initially did, and you wanted to dress in suits and get like a towel with fake blood and drive in a car driving somewhere, you could do that. If you wanted to play sitting around a table really quickly as an improvisational exercise, you could do that. I don't think it would be nearly as powerful, but if you were like really skilled at improv and role play and you could really just get into the headspace, yeah, you could do that if you wanted. You could play this in between rest stops on a road trip.
Yeah.
There's all these sort of axes that you can fiddle with how heavy you want to go.
Yeah.
And it becomes this really powerful improvisational exercise, right? It gives you these clear, explicit entanglements. It gives you cues to engage in very specific things, and it gives you prompts for players to engage with and push on.
Yeah.
So you have everything you need to have this 30-minute to an hour-long LARP experience without any other backgrounding, without any other understanding of how improv works, right? You don't need to know how improv works to understand that when X happens, you say Y, and when someone else says alpha, you say beta, right?
Right.
And I think that is super powerful. It gives you the scaffolding you need to explore a space that a lot of people are afraid to explore.
Right. I am afraid to explore that space. I talk about it very often. I am sometimes very uncomfortable with role-play heavy games. I don't feel like I'm very creative enough in the moment to play those games well. That is a thing I'm working on. I got it, guys. I know. I struggled a little in the beginning of this game, and it was okay that I struggled because like I said, I was the driver, so all of my points were right in front of me. I had 3 things I was focusing on. I was listening for someone to say the word that they needed to say for me to do my thing. I was trying to figure out how I was going to say the word that I had to say, and I had to ask questions. That was my job. My job was to ask questions. So at first I was like, I'm just going to focus on driving until I get focus on driving. I'm not driving. I'm standing in front of a TV with my hands out like they're pretending on a steering wheel, but whatever. And the video we picked, side note, the video we picked was a very leisurely drive through New Orleans. So I had to keep explaining why I was stopping forever at these red lights and stop signs. I'm not driving the car, but I have to make these. Anyway, it's not the point. The point is that I struggled a little in the beginning and I was quieter, but knowing that I had these 3 things that I was doing made it easier for me to be like, well, I'm just going to ask a question. Like, why did you get shot? Okay, now I've started. I can slow roll. Like, but who is supposed to be with you? And what are we supposed to be doing right now? And why don't we have as much loot as we thought we did? And am I going to the hospital? What the hell is going on? Like, I have to stop at the red light because that person is walking and I don't want the cops to follow me. Like, it started slow for me, but I rolled into it and it became much easier to keep going with that role play because I knew I could always just go back to my things. I could always just go back to my job and the 2 things that I'm either listening for or trying to fit into conversation.
Yeah.
And it made it very easy to go with the flow.
I think if I told someone like, hey, we're going to LARP today, and the only thing I'm going to give you is this half sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper, and then we're going to improv a story, that would sound very intimidating.
Yeah.
But what this game does so well is on that 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, you get all the scaffolding you need, which is something that we talk about all the time. Yeah. That's becoming a theme of Fairies Bellows, I think. You get everything you need to make that happen. And what that leads into is the replayability of this game.
Yeah.
Because it is so meticulously designed and it's so explicitly designed with these entanglements in mind, you question the replayability of this as a game. When we first finished it, we were all like, one of the first things we talked about was like, could we play this again? Because once you know the cues and commands, you will not get that same authentic discovery of the game. And even if you change the cues and commands, the relationships between them are going to stay mostly the same. But I think that is looking at the game in the wrong way. Out of Dodge sort of has 2 games in it. It has Out of Dodge Alpha and Out of Dodge Beta. And you will never play Out of Dodge Alpha again once you play it the first time.
Yeah.
Once you play your first game of Out of Dodge, you will never play it again. But that doesn't mean that the game is going to be weaker. It means that from henceforth on, you are playing Out of Dodge Beta.
Yeah.
And that game is going to be different, but it can be just as rewarding and fun and amazing as the first game. It's a matter of how you're looking at it, right? The first game, you're playing to discover all of these weird intricacies and interconnections and stuff. And that's going to be really fun. It's going to be amazing. And you're going to discover it. And it's going to be this wild, weird experience. After that, the next time you play this game, it's not going to be about discovery. It's going to be about experimentation. If you know the cues and you know what they do, and everyone knows how those cues work, you can play with those cues intentionally to tell a story that interests you and that it engages you. And what I think is going to be fun about that is if you're trying to play with this story in one direction and someone else in the car is playing with the story in a different direction, you're going to, just because you guys know the cues, you're not necessarily going to be manipulating the cues in the same way. Either you're not going to try to tell the same story and it's going to have this like interesting push and pull, or you are going to try to tell the same story and it's going to hit really well. I don't want to spoil anything, but if you know what words do which cues, you can use or hold on to those cues in a way that is going to make an interesting story.
Yeah.
The first time you're doing it, it's all random. You're gonna open your envelope and it's gonna say, when you feel like it, say this word. And you're going to be like, well, I don't know what this is going to do, so I'm just going to say it. You might do what I accidentally did and set a cue 8 times in a row that made someone else's experience very strange in the game. But if we were to play this again, I could intentionally use that word to tell an interesting story, rather discover what that word did. I think that is awesome. I wish that we had made ourselves play it a second time in a row just to see what it was like. Because while you're not going to ever get that natural, organic game again, there is still a lot to do with this game. And this is a game that bills itself as taking an hour. Our game took about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It is a short, fun game that you can just pick up and play with very minimal effort. We had people over, we played this, and then we played another game by Jason Morningstar called Space Post, which is amazing. Like, you could play this game as like a warm-up exercise to play a different game.
Yeah. Especially if you were doing a very, like, role-play heavy game. Like, this just gets the juices flowing in a scaffolded, boundaried way, right? Like, you have to play within this world, and you have these words you have to say, and you have these actions you're going to have to do when you hear certain words or whatever. But it's a different story every time you play it. Like, it definitely is a different story every time you play it. And I think I agree with you on the replayability, the alpha and beta. That was really smart. You're a really smart guy. I just think that makes a lot of sense. I just think that makes a lot of sense. I didn't think about it that way when I was concerned about replayability. I didn't think about, like, you're essentially playing two different games, but you are.
Yeah.
Like, that first game is all about that discovery, and that second game is all about that exploration within the rules that you now know. You didn't know them before, and now you know them.
Yeah. After we played the first time, I was a little bit disappointed because I was like, oh, I'll never get to play that again. Now, thinking about this game again, my mind is just, like, buzzing with all the ways I could manipulate the few tools that this game gives us to tell different, interesting heist comedy dramas,
right.
You know?
Yeah.
I think your natural inclination when you finish this game is to be like, oh man, I'm never going to get to do that again.
Right.
But I think that does a disservice to yourself and to this game if you stay in that mindset. Because I really think that this game has a lot to offer beyond the first game.
I agree.
That said, the first game is amazing.
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
Y'all should play the game. I know, like, I know you're listening to this because you're already kind of interested in the game, but, like, you should play it. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Our next section is I wonder what would happen if, and I do not have a lot for this game specifically because it is pretty straightforward. I personally wonder what would happen if American Freeform had more of a foothold in our games conversations. I don't think very many people know about, like, American Freeform style games.
I know I didn't.
And that's a real shame. If you think of them as, like, or even if you don't think of them, American Freeform and, like, casual LARPs are a really interesting space for us to be playing with games, and we don't hear very much about them. Bully Pulpit, the publisher, is really good for this. You can check out, I subscribe to Bully Pulpit's, it's called Drip, and I hate that name, but it's like Kickstarter's sort of Patreon thing. And so I'm subscribed to Bully Pulpit's Drip, and every month, I get this little, like, American Freeform LARP style game. And they're so cool, they're so interesting, they're exploring such interesting spaces that I think just more people need to be playing them. And I'm trying to think now of other designers. Lizzie Stark publishes a lot of, I believe their games are considered American Freeform. Jason Morningstar, obviously. But there's so many other games in this tradition. I would like to bump the collection #Feminism, which is a collection of games about feminism, many of which fall into this sort of, like, American Freeform lens, which I had my students play, and they're really good. And I'm trying to think of, like, more. I think I have more written down in our notes for later. but yeah, I wonder what would happen if these games had more of a presence in our discussions about RPGs.
Well, I think that leads really nicely into the thing that I frequently talk about on this podcast, which is just, like, how new player friendly is this game? And I think I'm going to say something that might be a little shocking, but I don't actually think that this game is extremely new player friendly.
Yeah, that kind of goes against what I mean. So this is a point of disagreement for us because So I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to explain why I say that. It's not that it's not new player friendly, but I don't think that this game is new to improv friendly. If you've never improved or you're not comfortable with improv and you're playing with a group of people who are all in the same boat as you, who have never improved and who are not new or who are new to improv, it's going to be very hard to play this game and get a good experience out of it because you are going to be out of character more than you are in character, I think. if it were 4 Dianas playing this game, I don't like real talk. I don't know that this game would have been any fun. I tried to get out of character more than any of you noticed. I didn't get out of character, but I tried several times. But hold on, because I have some more things to say.
Okay.
I can see you getting ready to fight me on this.
No, I just have a question.
Well, what's the question?
So my question then is, we talked earlier about the scaffolding that this game gives you. Do you think that the scaffolding isn't good enough, or do you think that it is just an outside skill that you would need to recognize the scaffolding for it to be effective?
I think you have to be willing and excited to yes and for this game. And if you don't know what yes anding is, and if you have no idea how to improv, that scaffolding isn't going to be terribly helpful. Again, I'm coming at this from Diana's point of view, like from my point of view, how it would have been if there were 4 Dianas, right? I can't speak for every character ever, but for 4 Dianas, I don't want to say it wouldn't have been super helpful, because I do think it would have been helpful. I just think that I would have spent more time out of character. It probably would have been 50-50 out of character, in character. And so if you were playing this game with 3 Dianas and 1 Zach, then I think you could play this game. I do think that this could be a really good new player-friendly game. Maybe not like brand new to playing game. Maybe like this is your second game that you've tried to play or something. Because if you have somebody who's willing to kind of teach you how to improv just a little, you don't need to be an improv expert. I really am not an improv expert. I am very bad at improv. But if you just have somebody who's willing to like boost you up a little bit, like give those comments like, oh, that was a really good statement. Oh, that was a really good question. Like to kind of encourage you in the beginning, then I think the game flows a little better and you be more willing to jump into it and do that improv, because it is awkward. There's a reason people don't do it. Like there's a reason that LARP isn't bigger, and there's a reason that people aren't like jumping all over American Freeform. It's awkward to act. You're acting without a script, and it is awkward for people. It's awkward for me. I can say that very confidently. It's awkward for me to act without a script. And so even with that scaffolding, I need the like confidence boost of knowing that I'm doing an okay job. So I need, you know what I mean? Like I just need that person to be my scaffolding as well as the game being my scaffolding.
Okay. All right.
So that's what I mean by that. I don't know that this is super new player friendly. Like if you're all brand new to this, I don't know that this is the game you should start with, like for role-playing games ever. You might want to have something different under your belt before you play this game.
Okay.
Now, you and I have been playing role-playing games for years. Picking this game up wasn't an issue. If we'd only been playing like, I don't know, Torchbearer or something before we started playing this, I don't know that this game would have been an issue either. Like, I feel like you need something, either a little bit of experience or somebody with experience to help you play this game.
I think that is absolutely think that's all valid. I want to identify a few things. First of all, I think you're much better at improv than you give yourself credit for.
And I need you to say that while I'm improving this game.
And so that's the thing that I'm pulling out most. It's the confidence aspect. Mm-hmm. It's the having confidence that you feel like you wouldn't have the confidence to dig into LARP if you didn't have someone else kind of giving you the go-ahead that you were doing it all right.
Right.
And so I also don't necessarily think it would be a problem if 4 Dianas played this game and they spent 50% of the time in the game and 50% of the time out of the game. I think that kind of falls into that LARP dial.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in that confidence thing, because I do think that is a major wall that keeps people away from LARP and freeform and even RPGs just in general, is people feel like they can't act. They feel like they don't have the quote unquote skills to act and to play with people and to like tell a story. I don't know how to solve that other than encouragement right? It's just so important that people know that they can tell stories and that they can be silly once in a while, right? Once we become adults, it's much harder to be silly and to wave around foam guns and pretend to die.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, one of the reasons we didn't play in a real driving car is because one of our players was saying that they would feel much more self-conscious playing this out in the real world where other people can see you.
Yeah.
And so I think that confidence is I think it's a hurdle.
I agree.
It's a hurdle to this game.
Yep. Nope. I 100% agree with that.
I don't want it to be because this is a really fun game.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that confidence or you don't have somebody who's going to help you build that confidence for this game.
Yeah. Can you turn around and pull that blue book off the shelf, please? So this is a book that I got for Christmas last year. It is Improv for Gamers by Karen 12, published by Evil Hat Productions. And I have read through this book and I've tried to get my group to do some of the things within it. I think it's definitely much better for, large regular groups more than like kind of what we typically do. But I think this type of tool could really help. Anything that
I mean, there's a reason the book was written. So
yes.
It's like identified as an issue.
Anything that helps people feel more comfortable with that sort of silly space of pretending and just acting, I think is a really good tool to try to help change that mindset. Let us return with the Elixir. So this is where we talk about other media that could inspire or explore these ideas, the same ideas as Out of Dodge, in similar or different ways. I have actually talked about a few already. The big one I want to talk about that I talked about previously is Bully Pulpit's Drip, which is full of small games like these, including Seat 5, which is a game in which you play as people in a small town, each running for a small government seat, and you all have different politics and different personal relationships that are getting you entangled, as well as one which I hope to play probably this winter now that we have the space, another game by Jason Morningstar called The Climb, in which you play as mountain climbers trying to summit a virgin peak, and I want to play that game so badly. So that would be my first Elixir.
I only have one, and it's the movie The Departed.
Now, why'd you choose The Departed?
So it made sense when I wrote it down. It's mainly the interconnectedness and the not knowing what's going on. Like when you're watching The Departed, you know what's going on, right? But the people in that movie, those characters, had no idea. The whole point of the movie is that Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't know who the rat is, who's Matt Damon, and Matt Damon doesn't know who the rat is, who's Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, they don't know who each other are, and they're trying to figure it out, and all these crazy hijinks happen, and there's all these everybody's interconnected in all these different ways, and all this crazy stuff happens. And also, when you, Google Reservoir Dogs, if you go through enough links, you'll get to The Departed. So, that's how I got there. And also just, I don't know, the feeling is there.
Yeah.
It's got the same sort of, tonal feeling.
Yeah, I can see that. I would probably go for something a little more comedic, personally. Reservoir Dogs, I think, has enough of that comedy to hit for me. Anything Coen Brothers, Fargo, either the movie or the TV show. Anything that kind of deals with messy, incompetent thieves, I think, is good. I also wanted to bill the game Ghost Court, which is another intro to LARP game by Jason Morningstar. This is a game where you are playing out the TV courtroom style antics of a court that sees cases between the living and the dead. It's very goofy. It's a party game for I think between 6 and 20 people or more. That it gives you a little quick LARP prompt and just kind of lets you run with it as long as you want, and then you sit down. It's basically a party LARP game, and I think that is also a really good option for intro to LARP style if you're trying to explore that space.
Yeah, I agree.
What is a story you would like to tell with this game?
I think it would be interesting to play this game Because you would get back to game alpha if some random person came up with your interconnectedness and then just handed you the game. And like you didn't look at it, you didn't know what was going on, and then you got to play it again. You would get a little bit of that game alpha back, which I think would be interesting. But that's not really the kind of game that I'd want to play. What I'd want to play is 4 people who are brand new to the crime world. Like this is their first gig ever. And everything has gone wrong. And they're brand new, so they don't know what they're supposed to do. I just think that would be interesting. But you'd have to combine them. Like you would have to have that added confusion for that to be, I think the personal opinion, I think that would have to be fun.
Yeah, you would have to change a couple little things, but I think you could do it for sure.
Yeah, and I just think it would be fun if you were all like, well, is this how they're supposed to go? Am I supposed to get shot? Is that what's supposed to happen? I don't know. Yeah.
No one thinks they're supposed to possibly get
but getting shot is the only spoiler that we've given as an example. Like, I can't go over anything else. So, like, that's my example.
Okay. All right. Fair. Is there anything else you want to talk about with Out of Dodge?
I know that I said that this might not be a, like, super new player friendly game, but this is a very fun game, and I want to encourage everyone to play this. And if you've never played a game before, please don't let my opinion stop you from playing this game. If you have if you want to play this game, man, go to town. Play this game. It is so fun, and everyone should have an opportunity to play it.
I don't think what you said was unfair or is going to push anyone away from this game. People get nervous about acting, and I think that is a legitimate concern that a lot of people fear when they are starting improv or LARP or roleplay. And I think that this game could help that. But I also think that if you are hung up on that, it is going to kind of get in the way of this game, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Play this game. It's a fun game.
Yeah, play this game.
That's my tagline and note.
Play Out of Dodge. It's $4 on DriveThruRPG, and it is worth more than that.
Oh, absolutely.
The Farrier's Bellows is a production of The Gauntlet. You can find The Gauntlet on Twitter at GauntletRPG. You can find our website at gauntlet-rpg.com, and we are on Patreon at patreon.com/gauntlet, where you can contribute to The Gauntlet and support more great shows like ours.
We want to send a special thank you to our editor, Zach B. Also, you can find us on iTunes. Please rate and subscribe to us there. We would really, really appreciate it.
You can follow Diana and I on Twitter at Farrier's Bellows. Talk to us and talk about us. We would love to hear your thoughts on the show and on this game. You can find me on Twitter at ZWGarth.
And me at ICDiana. Until next time, you cannot dream yourself into a character. You must forge and hammer yourself into one.
Remember to always double-check the score.